Hello and welcome to the channel. Thank you so much to the sponsors. These videos are made for you and thanks to your generosity. Today we'll talk a little bit about sails. What a surprise. No one would have expected us to speak about sailing ships on this channel, would they? Today's victim of choice are the topsails. By the most popular period of sailing ships, which are the usual subjects of films, nautical fiction, and the overwhelming majority of models, the topsails had evolved to being essentially the main drivers of a sailing ship. But that was not always the case. It is hard to tell exactly when they were invented and by whom, just as is the case with the gun ports, for example. But we do know that by the later 15th century, topsails most definitely existed. They were really an additional light weather sails. They were not the main propulsion of the vessel. They were the first ones to be struck on deck when the weather worsened. They were used only in specific advantageous conditions. By the 16th century, however, topsails had increased dramatically in size. And by the 17th century, they were an important part of the sailing wardrobe of a vessel afloat. Again, I will refer you to all the contemporary maritime art of the 17th century. For that is an incredibly good source of information. Usually, I am the last one to advocate in favor of iconography. And oh, how many times I have questioned iconography. And there are the odd times when iconography has proven me wrong. During the Black Sea map, for example, we found a vessel that demonstrated at least some of the interpretation of iconography of the ancient world are spot on, despite all the unbelievers, despite all the engineering logic, etc., etc. Of course, I'm referring to the 5th century BC wreck that we found complete or very nearly complete on the bottom of the Black Sea. But returning to the topsails, nevertheless, especially for the 17th century, this is a beautiful period of maritime history. We have the great Willem van de Velde's father and son, younger and senior, and we also have an entire Dutch school of maritime art. This is a period in which this is an increasingly popular way of paying tribute to what converted a tiny nation in Europe into the foremost maritime power the world has seen. And the artists who worked in this period, the artists who painted the ships, in some cases themselves were sailors. Zeeman, Reinier Noms de Zeeman, for example, or at any rate they were serving clients who were deeply knowledgeable of the subject. They either owned ships, had commanded ships, built ships, etc. Why am I spending so much time? Because what we know about the usage of topsails in this period to a large extent comes exactly from Dutch maritime art of the period. And this is one of the rare instances in which you can trust the source information for this. It's not the only source, of course. There are lists of rigging, there are lists of spars, there are even methods of calculating the dimensions of the spars. So when you combine all of this information together with the very rare rigging finds, besides the Vasa sails, which we have discussed in a previous video, and a mid-18th century Swedish, I believe, merchant vessel which was excavated by French colleagues in the Mediterranean. They found sails aboard the vessel also. But this is a rare find. So whether we like it or not, we have to depend on iconography to a large extent of how they are set up, how they are used, especially how they are operated. So returning to the subject of operation of the topsail, we have to say that in the early parts, and this is in complete contrast with this model, for example, we will see that in the 17th century, the topsail yard is barely more than half the length of the lower yard. We have topsails trapezoidal in shape, as most topsails are, but with very narrow upper base and very wide lower base of it. This has something to do with how the sail was set, how the sail was operated. For most of the 17th century, sailors actually had to crawl out on the yard and were standing, sitting, crawling along the yard. They did not have horses, they did not have stirrups to support them in place. That is why topsails, generally speaking, in this period, could not and were not reefed. The reef points emerge in the second half of the 17th century. In around 1670, this is really a very dynamic period. Within a decade, major changes happen on the ship. Captains change, sailing rigs modify. Yet again, and I do recognize that I'm sidestepping from what I was talking about a moment ago, but yet again I have to point to something that I try to teach my students. Contrary to what secondary literature from popular authors of semi-historical books to ship modelers, you constantly hear the story of how conservative, how little has changed. Well, yes, I'm using a much later period source material, but so little change in this period that it is the same. No, that is not true. Things change, they change rapidly. This is not a conservative field, quite on the contrary. It is calling these ships not changing in the period at all is something like claiming that the current crop of spaceships are exactly the same as they were 20-30 years ago. They're not. They have nothing in common with each other except that they do go into space and upon occasion even do not explode. The same is true for sailing ships. They are dramatically developing. Things are changing. So the reason why the topsail is so narrow in the early part at the head is because of the handling. It is very hard to get up on that yard to balance there while you're furling the sail. Also, this is a period in which you're not going to see the topsails furrowed in a body along the yard the way you do in the 18th century. Quite on the contrary, they are gathered, they're bunched together right around the topmast. The sheet clews remain more or less almost extended to the full width of the lower yard. The topsail yard itself is lowered to the cap, and the body of the sail is bunched together in the center. You can clearly see it in iconography. It is stoppered with line, and it is positioned, and it is all gathered inside, essentially on the top platform. This begins to change towards the later 17th century. We begin to see first one reef point, then eventually towards the end of the century we begin to see a second reef band. But this is still a very far cry from the Napoleonic period when we have up to 4 bands of reefs on the topsail. But by the 1670s we begin to see horses, we begin to see stirrups. So sailors are no longer hanging off with both ends of the yard. Actually, it is 1670s towards the 1680s that we begin to see these changes, just as with the arrival of the STAYSAILS. So the handling of the topsail changes because of these inventions. If in the first part of the 17th century and all the way into the 60s and even early 70s you see very frequently stormy weather being encountered with topsails lowered halfway through the mast rather than set full blast or reefed, by the later 17th century we no longer see these billowing lowered yards in heavy weather. They either are completely struck or they are set properly. It should be also pointed out that until the early 18th century, the first half of the 18th century, ships weathered storms, and in heavy weather they shortened sail down to courses. They were handled completely differently from the way later 18th century vessels were handled. Of course, all the so-called replicas that are afloat nowadays, so-called traditional ships, they all are set up and handled in a late 18th, early 19th century fashion, not at all in the 17th century fashion. From about the 1740s onwards, we begin to see that ships switch from being handled under courses in heavy weather and laying a hull under mainsail. We see them beginning to lay a hull under topsails, and the courses, the lower sails, are furrowed up. It is only the topsails that are set. This is also result of the emergence of reefing points, horses, etc., which allow the topsail to be handled in heavy weather. The other notable feature that you are going to encounter from the later 17th century onwards is that the length of the topsail yard proportionately increases versus the length of the lower yard under it. This is connected with suddenly the topsail becoming the main handling sail. When you are preparing to fight, you shorten to topsails, you strike the lower courses completely, except the driver in the back. And of course, fore and aft jibs on the bowsprit, but everything else is struck. In the 17th century, in battle, you did raise, especially the mainsail usually was, if not furrowed, then certainly lifted in its gear, and sometimes the foresail also. But that was more to do with decreasing the number of people that have to be dedicated to sailing the ship and increasing therefore the gun crews rather than any specifics of handling the vessel. But you do see topsails as major part of the fighting canvas. By the end 18th century, stripping a ship, clearing a ship for action involved also stripping it down to fighting sail, which essentially are the fore and afts on the bowsprit, the driver, and the three topsails. Because of the position of the topsails, because of all the material that they had to chafe against, for example, the tops themselves, you do see on the topsails these reinforcements on the inside of the vessel. You can see them on some paintings as early as the later 17th century, but they really become a dominant feature in the 18th century because the topsail becomes the working horse of the vessel. And that prevents chafing. But this is also why the crow's feet on the tops, which through a U-frow are assigned to the stays. This is the main purpose of that. It's the only real purpose for the crow's foot. It is keeping the foot, the skirt of the sail away from the top, away from anything that can really chafe it, rip it, catch it, etc. As I have said many times before, everything on a sailing ship is beautifully logical item. It is there for a reason. There is no coincidence. This is not guesswork. And if it stayed there for ages, it is not because some shipwright or seaman was stupidly ignorant, conservative, narrow-minded, you name it. It is because this thing was actually working and was found to be needed, and nothing better had taken its place yet. So with this, I wish you a most wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to the sponsors for your generosity. Without your generosity, I would have long ago given up on the videos. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.